Morning, everybody. I'm Kavita Vankare. I work here at IIHS, and on behalf of everybody at IIHS, I would like to extend all of you a very, very warm welcome to the fourth edition of Urban Policy Dialogues. When we started off, we didn't know whether we would go beyond the one, build on that, but we have organized it in a little different format. So today we have panels on land, water, and housing. But tomorrow the whole day is dedicated to our work on climate change because there's a team here which has been working for past many years, and we're going to present our work and have a discussion around that. So yeah, warm welcome once more. Before I go on to introductions, Pooja wanted me to make some announcements. There are two exits, one from which most of you came on this side. There's another exit there. We will have coffee breaks, but there's always coffee and tea right at the back behind you. Washrooms are to your left. So any other announcements at the moment? No. Any information that you want, there's a help desk right here from where the registration desk was. Please go and contact them. I can't make out a home. And please put your phone on silent mode. Thanks for reminding me. One more thing, apart from the session in the morning where IIHS will be presenting our work, and first half of tomorrow, Chatham rules apply, which means nothing that is spoken in this ever goes out. There won't be any recording, there won't be any camera, so please feel free to say what you want to do. Even when it's putting out on social media, no names are going to go out, so please feel free to speak up your mind. Yeah, so warm welcome, and we'll begin by a round of short introductions by all of you. If you could all state your name, your area of work, and which organization you represent, that would be great. So let me start from there. Chandrika.
Good morning. My name is Chandrika Bahadur. I'm director of the SDG Academy, which is an online learning portal for the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm also president of SDSN Association, which is a non-profit that works on the Sustainable Development Goals across 600 universities around the world. Thank you.
I'm Meera Bapat. I'm independent researcher. Urban poverty is the focus of my work and a whole lot of other issues related to it.
Solly Benjamin. I'm here at IIHS, mostly working on land and governance and poverty. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anuja Jayaraman. I work in SNEHA, Society for Nutrition, Education and Health Action. I am a demographer, economist by training, but work on monitoring and evaluation of public health projects in Mumbai slums.
Good morning, I'm Ganesh Kumar, working in IIHS with Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program, Chennai.
I'm Sam Daniel. I work with IIHS, and we all work in Chennai office.
Hi everyone, I'm Navamani. I'm part of Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program. I'm a town and country planner. Thank you.
I'm Deepika. I work at IIHS with the land governance team.
Hi, I'm Dipankar and I work at IIHS with the land governance team.
My name is Prasad Shetty. I am from Bombay. I work with the School of Environment and Architecture in Bombay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Vidushi Bhatt and I also work with the land governance team at IIHS.
Hi, my name is Varun Panikar and I also work with the land governance team in Delhi at IIHS.
Good morning, my name is Bajrang Lal. I work with the School for Democracy in Rajasthan. I was a government servant before joining School for Democracy.
Good morning, I'm Aditi Harure. I work at IIHS Legal and Regulation team.
Good morning, I'm Sridhar. I'm from the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. I'm a plant breeder by training and an administrator of the Bihar cadre. Right now I am also handling the Center for Disaster Management and Center for Rural Studies at the Academy.
Good morning everybody. I am Tuhin Ghosh from School of Oceanographic Studies, Jadavpur University, Kolkata. We are now working on the climate change impacts and adaptation and migration in the delta areas. We are working in Indian part of Sundarban and also Mahanadi Delta. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Arul Silva from Bangalore, working with slum communities in Bangalore.
Hi, Shalmali. I'm from Bombay and I'm representing Omidia Network's property rights team.
Good morning all, I am Gokul. I represent Keystone Foundation here and I work on springs and wetlands in the Nilgiris. Thank you.
Good morning, I am Ramarao from Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, Pune. My interest is in climate change analysis using climate model simulations.
I am Milind Muzumdar, same institute, IITM, Pune. My expertise is in climate modeling and monsoon dynamics.
Good morning, I am Yogesh Jadeja from Arid Communities and Technologies. It's a Bhuj-based non-government organization. We are working on water resource management in general.
Hi, I'm Apurva. I work with a design team here in Bangalore IIHS.
Hello, my name is Amog. I work here at IIHS on issues of economy and governance.
Hi, I'm Vinita. I work with the risk and resilience team here at IIHS.
Good morning, I'm Namrita. I am part of the people function team at IIHS. I'm glad to let you know that I'm completing 6 years at IIHS and I'm so proud of it. Thank you.
Just hold on to the mic.
I'm Ravindra. I'm former Chief Secretary, Karnataka. Interested in things urban.
Thank you, sir. That was a very humble introduction.
Good morning. I'm Kapil Gupta from IIT Bombay, and I focus on urban flooding, flood disaster management, and we are trying to link it to climate change. You can bear in climate change for everything.
Aroman Ravi, I work at IIHS.
I'm Deepak Sanan. I also advise at IIHS on land and sundry other issues.
I get a chance to introduce all of you later properly.
Good morning. My name is Tippeswamy. I am a retired engineer-in-chief from BWSS, Bangalore Water Supply and Sewage Board. Now I am working as a consultant.
Hi everyone, I'm Shubhra Jain. I work in the area of urban sanitation. I support the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Program with IIHS. I'm a consultant. Thank you.
Good morning everyone. My name is Vidya Bhusan. I am UPD at IIS, working as Deputy Director in Labasna, Mussoorie.
Good morning everyone. I am Kapil Setia, Chief Architect from Chandigarh. I'm an architect and urban planner by training and look forward to all the good takeaways from the IIHS learnings.
Hi everyone, my name is Vimala. I work for Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program in IIHS Chennai.
Good morning everyone, my name is Wekoe Utsaha, Akole in short, and I'm from an organization called Northeast Network based in Nagaland, and we work on issues of gender, governance, natural resource management and livelihoods. Pleased to be here.
Hi everyone, my name is Grishma and I work with the climate change team at IIHS.
I am GK Bhatt, I am from Taru.
Good morning, I'm Paul Rabe from the Netherlands, Institute for Housing and Urban Development Studies, also IIHS, at Erasmus University in Rotterdam and the University of Leiden Institute for Asian Studies, interested in urban land governance issues Asia-wide and also integrating land and water issues.
Good morning everyone, I am Neha Khandekar. I have been working in Indian Himalayan region on water and livelihoods. Right now I am with Terry.
Hi, I'm Srinati. I work in IIHS for the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Program.
Hi, I'm Sansi. I also work with IIHS at the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support.
Hello, I'm Soundarya. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the climate change team in IIHS.
Hi, I'm Natasha. I'm a postdoc fellow with the climate change team as well.
Hi, I'm Ritvika. I work with the climate change team here at IIHS.
Hello, my name is Chandni Singh. I work on issues of migration and climate change adaptation at IIHS.
Hi, good morning everybody. My name is Molly. I work with the Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation Support Program, IIHS Chennai.
Hi, I'm Anish. I do Urban Fellowship in IIHS.
Good morning, my name is Asma. I work with IIHS Chennai, the sanitation team.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kendrick. I work with the climate change team in IIHS.
Morning, my name is Ananya. I'm also an urban fellow.
Morning, I'm Captain Pooja. I head the operations at IIHS.
Good morning, my name is Nilufer. I work with operations team.
Yeah, good morning, my name is Bharti. I also work with operations team.
Good morning, I'm Nilanjana. I work with communication team at IIHS Bangalore. Hi, I'm Anna. I work here as an executive associate.
I'm Mohan Raj, part of IT team, IHS.
Hi, good morning. I'm Aditi. I work at IIHS as a researcher.
Hi, my name is Lakshmi. I work with Aditi and at IIHS as a researcher.
Good morning, I'm Swastik from IIHS.
Good morning, my name is Karthik and I work with the people function team at IIHS.
Good morning, I'm Nandita. I work with the people function team at IIHS.
Good morning, I'm Karthika. I also work with people function at IIHS.
Hi, I'm Sumati. I'm part of the people function.
Good morning, I'm Parikshit. I'm part of the people function team here.
Hi, I'm Robin. I work with Tamil Nadu Urban Sanitation, IIHS Chennai.
Good morning, myself Dhanpal. I'm with the Urban Resilience team in IIHS.
Hi, I'm Anushya. I work with the communications team at IIHS.
Good morning, I'm Geetika. I work with the practice team and work on water sanitation, housing and planning.
Morning, I'm Bhuvina. I'm affiliated with the General Global University and currently a visiting faculty at IIT. My research interests are in urban land and governance.
I'm Shruti. I'm a lawyer. I have an academic interest in land and property disputes.
Hi, I'm Rekha. I'm with the Word Lab, IIHS's editorial team.
Hi, I'm Nilakshi. I work with the Geospatial Lab at IIHS.
Teja, I'm part of the Geospatial Lab and practice team here at IIHS.
I'm Anand. I'm part of the finance team in IIHS.
Good morning, everyone. I'm part of the finance team. I'm Nishant Agarwal. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Maitri and I work with the Karya team at IIHS.
Hi, this is Sanjay. I'm work with the administration team, IIHS.
I'm Colonel Satish Reddy, retired, presently Chief of Campus Development at IIHS. Thank you.
Good morning, my name is Amir. Welcome to IIHS. Many of you must have received emails from me. I'm very thankful that all of you took time off and are here with us. Look forward to an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Sandeep. I'm part of Media Lab, and Zora, my friend, is upstairs. Is doing the live streaming of the event.
Hi, good morning. I am also Sandeep. So I am the CFO here. So in finance, yeah, thank you.
Hi, my name is Krishna. I am from International Water Management Institute.
Anybody else who's not introduced who just came in? Okay, so as people come in, we'll do another round of introductions. So warm welcome once more, and like Amir said, look forward to a very, very interesting day of conversations. It's not about what we present, but it's really the knowledge and the experience that all of you get here. With that, I would like to move on to the first part of the program, which is actually a book launch done by colleagues here at IIHS on Land Records. For that, I would like to invite Mr. Ravindra, our director, Aroma Ravi, and Deepak Sanan on stage to launch the book. And also the colleagues who have part of this, Deepika Jha, Sudeshna Mitra. Our colleagues are very good at hiding when it comes to publicizing their work. So please somebody find Deepika and get her here.
Yes,
she was
yes.
around. Yeah. So please.
Yeah. So just very quickly, I mean, I asked Dr. Ravindra to do this at short notice. This is a piece of work that we've hidden very carefully for the last couple of years. It's on a topic which is quite challenging. It's probably the first piece of work since independence that looks at land systems in the country across the rural and the urban continuum. People have worked on urban land, many of us here have done that. People have worked on agrarian relations and revenue systems, but this is probably the first time that we've actually done this systematic piece of work. Deepak Sanan sort of leads the team now that's looking at this.
So we work on difficult and complex questions. Nobody really wants to work on land anymore, but it's a fundamental question that influences everything that we do in this country. So this is a set of books which I'll ask Dr. Ravindra to sort of release. Come on, you guys. So Deepika, you want to say something about it? Yeah. So this was actually supported by a whole range of people, but fundamentally I think we have colleagues here from ON who've helped support this piece of research over a significant period of time. Thank you, sir. So go ahead. So we looked actually at 4 states here: Gujarat, Bihar, Haryana, Himachal, and one that looks at national land record systems across the country. Anyway, they're doing work now currently in Maharashtra, and that's work that's gone on and will be revised hopefully in Karnataka. So yeah, so this is a great piece of work, and you know, it's like everything we do, it's publicly available, and now it will be available in print copies. So thanks so much, sir. This is the big, see, when we have most of our consultations here, we try and present stuff which is a little bit different from what we normally do in most Indian policy dialogues. We try and present, you know, evidence that we can have a debate upon, because if you have the evidence, then you can take lots of different positions. So this is part of that evidence collection process that we are trying to bring together across many states across the country. Yeah?
Yes. So, Deepika, I was told to say that copies of these books will be here on display. So during break, please utilize that time to go and have a look at the work we've done. With that, I hand over to Aro for the next session.
Great, good. So this is going to be an interesting session because it will probably last for a little while. What I'm going to try and show you, in a sense, to provoke the discussion of what we're going to do today, is some of the work that we're doing. But before that, I want to say a couple of things. This morning, a colleague of mine sent a very interesting sort of seminal piece of work from the head of the of MIT's Media Lab, which was looking at sustainability. And what strikes us, I mean, like my colleagues are fairly understated in what they do. Most of the work that we do here is in team. So even though there were only 1 or 2 of us up here, there's actually a large team of people who actually worked on this piece of work. So in some senses, whether it's research or practice, we effectively are standing on the shoulders of giants. I mean, you know, all the work that we're doing is built on decades of experience of a whole range of people. And unfortunately, what happens, whether it's in the case of publication or research or even in administration, some people come to the forefront. And I thought in sort of describing this, what struck me in the morning was 2 people who've been very important to where we've come just now. One is a colleague who's sort of helped build the practice program which sort of anchors this process. He's unfortunately not here today. Som is actually the person who's enabled this entire process that we're seeing here actually happen. And another person, we're sort of all connected here, but is also here, an old friend who died many years ago. Her name was Donella Meadows, who laid the underpinnings for a lot of this work. She was a US based scientist, systems person, but the more interesting thing about her work, apart from, you know, she became very famous at a very young age in 1972 when she wrote a book called Limits to Growth, which went on to sell 60 million copies. But that was not the interesting thing about her. She was one of the leading cyberneticians of our age, one of the leading environmental scientists in the US, who actually talked about climate change and a whole range of questions before, maybe 20 years before it happened. But the interesting thing about her was that she took the work that she did very seriously, in the sense that she gave up, she left MIT, moved to Dartmouth College, and later she left Dartmouth College as a full professor after setting up one of the largest environmental sciences programs in the States, to actually become a farmer. And the reason that she became the farmer was because if you're not able to actually practice the stuff that we're talking about, in effect nothing really changes in life. So, I mean, she was a leading academic. She was publishing literally to the date. She died quite accidentally because of, you know, a crazy brain infection. She was a practicing farmer and a practicing academic and a practicing thought leader at the same time. So I think what we've been trying to do here as an institution and with so many of people in the room is to try to bring together people who are trying to deal, whether it's with slum communities or, you know, whether it's with agriculture or water or everything else, trying to bring practice, theory building and education together. Because if we can't practice what we're talking about, and nothing changes. And in a country which is so large and has so many disadvantaged people, the practice is what's really important. So the idea of these policy dialogues was to pick up really hard questions that people don't want to talk about, like land, for example, or even water and sanitation, till the Prime Minister really brought it to the forefront a few years ago, was something that many of us, I mean starting with Meera and Deepak and many people, have been struggling with for 25 years to try and say, look, this is an important question. It's very complex. It's not only about building toilets. It's about dealing with water systems, it's dealing with behavior change, it's dealing with a whole range of processes, it's dealing with caste at its heart. So these are complex questions that have lots of interconnections with social, economic, political and other processes. And you can come at it from multiple directions. This is what we're all about here. We come from so many different directions to try and address them. But the real test is, does something actually change in the everyday life of people? And the policies are great, but if the policies don't actually translate into sort of action in everyday life, they don't make much sense. And many of us have struggled with this in a whole range of other areas. So the reason I mentioned Som and Dana was that, I mean, Som Bhatt and I were part of this whole sort of institution that was built by Delano Meadows starting in the 1980s, which actually helped define the framework for sustainability as far as the world is concerned. People don't recognize this. It's called the Balaton Group. But I think there are about 400 people who have been thought and practice leaders across the world starting the early 1980s, which have now become something that has become something very large at the level of the UN, at the level of the country, etc., etc. But these are the people who through their action were able, and many of them academics, have defined how practice actually works, whether it's in water or in even in renewable energy. I still remember early meetings in the late 80s, early 90s with somebody who's in his 1990s, a student of Niels Bohr from Denmark, who was a leader of renewable energy development in the 1980s. So at that point of time, we were talking about the energy transition. Denmark was one of the first countries in the world that actually set up large-scale wind turbines, moved to 20% renewables. Now we're actually talking about getting to 50 and beyond. At that point of time, there were very few people who understood the linkages between the global environment, local development and the transition of the economy. So these were people who have helped us in a sense build the ideas that sort of underpin a lot of what we're talking today. And I will try and make the connections between the local, which is most critical, and the global in that work, because that's one of the things that we try and do here at IIHS, to try and sort of connect the dots. So I'm going to look at 4 different things today very quickly. It will be a long session, but the idea is more to provoke than anything else. I'm going to start with a piece of work that some colleagues have done, and we'll bring them out of the, in a second. They're hiding at the back as usual. This is, you'll see it, and I'll show it to you here. It's an atlas that we've been working on for a long time, but it's finally come out in its form. It's an atlas of the top 100 cities in the country. It looks at how land use change actually has transformed this country over many places. There's a similar piece of work that's been done internationally that was released at Habitat 3 last year. This is a much more detailed piece of work. I'll start with that, showing you the big picture of how change is happening using advanced technology in some senses, using satellites. Then I'll go on to start looking at sustainability. This is building on the work. Those of you who here last year, we've systematically building on work on the Sustainable Development Goals in India. So I'm going to show you the first comparative index across states. This is something that Niti Aayog was meant to have produced. Because they were taking so long, we just got kind of irritated and said we'll do it. So we've done it, so I'm going to show that to you. That's the second thing that I'll show you. And then I'll go on to a much more analytical piece of work, which actually tries to explain some of the internal dynamics of India's urbanization. And here we are not focused only on the urban. As you can hear from people in the room, we have people here who work on stuff from rural migration and livelihoods all the way across the urban, because I think we have a very fundamental question to address in this country at the moment, and that is how we're going to keep the balance between the rural and the urban, between lifestyles and culture that we have, which is very important, ecosystem services and agriculture, and this so-called urban productivity. So we'll show you some of our cutting edge work that's being done in that space, new theoretical work. It's tied into a whole range of practical questions and connected to policy questions on sustainability. And then finally I'll close with some stuff which is going to be I guess a celebration of work done by many people in the room, not only us, on climate. Climate seems to be very interesting and charismatic question at the moment, but it really has a direct relationship, as many of our colleagues have shown here, with the everyday lives of hundreds of millions of people. And in some senses, it's going to become even more challenging. I mean, this city, for example, apart from many other places in the country, is at serious risk on that. So that's what I'm quickly going to do. It's going to be a big sweep. So, I mean, just sit back. The details are not important. The presentations are available. This is being live streamed at the moment, so you can have access to it. Basically, get the gist of what I'm trying to say. And as I said, this is not my work. Most of the work is done by a whole range of other colleagues. I'm just presenting it to you to try and connect up the dots so that we can move forward and get some sense of what's happening. Okay, great. So, yeah, can we just shift? Yeah. The other screen also. So I'm going to use two screens in, yeah. Sometimes the screens will show the same thing, sometimes will show different things, but I mean, you know, just live with me for a bit. So this is a very, very quick view of the 100 largest cities in the country. I'm just going to take you through them. I mean, you know, 10, 12 years ago when I used to do this, I remember doing a similar thing at Columbia, maybe, only knows, more than a decade ago. We used data that came from outside this country. This is done completely in-house. It's done by colleagues here who are, I'll bring them out at the end. They're hiding at the moment. So just very, very quickly, so what you're seeing here is three things. We've tried to simplify. That's great. This is based on this on the census of India. The numbers you see there are the population numbers. That's Greater Mumbai, so you can see the city. The red is the built-up areas in the city. Of course, what this doesn't show here is the informal settlements. I mean, more than 10 years ago, many of us, including Meera and others, we actually mapped the informal settlements in Mumbai, and you find that it's, the areas that we have are less than 5% of the total areas. So this is the built-up area. You can see Bombay, Pune. On the right side, there's Thane, and between New Bombay, that's built out. So I'm going to quickly flash you through to get the gestalt of the top 100 cities. So that's Mumbai, that's Delhi. These are all to the same scale, fine. So while you're looking at it, look at the patterns. So when I saw this for the first time, just a few days back, the thing that really surprised. Sorry, where am I going? Sorry. When I saw this for the first time, oops. Can you just bring me back? Yeah, okay. This is the same scale, okay? So what really strikes you is that in some senses, if you just look at them, Delhi is much larger than Mumbai. Look at the population sizes. So that, in some senses, when you're looking at some parts of Mumbai, K-Ward and places like that, you can see the densities inside the cities. So, it requires, in some senses, a little bit of satellite stuff to give you a little bit of a sense of what's happening. So, sorry. That's Delhi. That's Kolkata as number 3 at about 15 million or so, again to the same scale. That's Chennai, which has grown very, very rapidly in the last many years. That's Bangalore. In fact, I'm going to stand here because I can't see it, so you can see at the same time. Okay, that's Bangalore at about 10 million. Also tremendous growth. The green areas, as you can see around that, are agriculture, in some cases forests. That's Hyderabad. What you see on the outer boundary there is the metropolitan boundary of the city, and of course the peripheral ring road. That's Naidu's gift to Hyderabad. That's Ahmedabad at 7.2 million there, and you can see the outgrowths across Ahmedabad. Again, you can see the concentric rings, you can see the city, you can see the bridges, what's actually happening. That's Pune, and of course to the top left there's Chinchwad. In some senses, in terms of governance, these things show you that maybe you should start considering a different metropolitan governance frame for the city. That's Surat, one of the most rapidly growing cities in this part of the world. Many colleagues have worked on it. Bhatt and others have worked on critical work on the flooding, and you can there see Hazira, which is now developing to be a major industrial center in some senses in that region. That's Jaipur in rank. So Jaipur is in the top 10, again growing very rapidly. That's Kanpur, and you can see the new outgrowth areas there, and of course sitting in the plain you can see the green. That's Lucknow. We worked in Lucknow maybe 20 or more years ago, and there was hardly anything on the other side, and now it's grown tremendously. Kursi Road even further south towards Kanpur. That's Nagpur. That's Ghaziabad, outgrowth of Delhi. You can see Delhi of course on the left. That's Indore, also going relatively rapidly. That's Coimbatore, with a whole range of different sort of outgrowth areas, let's say. Very different form of development, so interesting to see. This is Kochi, and you can see that classic Kerala pattern of extended development that's there. You can see the backwater areas. You can see that's Patna, Again, outgrowth going from one side on the other side of the Ganga. So you can see the importance of bridges. That's Kozhikode. Again, similar to many other forms of Kerala.
What kind of population?
What are the population figures in Kozhikode? What are the issues? There's the issue with the boundary here, because the boundary is not so clearly defined. So the UA and the other boundaries are a little tricky. On that, Bhopal, 2 million. You can see the lakes there. This is of course a good year, so the lakes are relatively full. That's Baroda. Again, growing very rapidly from a contained development. That's Agra. Again, towards Delhi with the expressway, you see lots of ribbon development, and you see the whole fabric of rural India sitting at the background there. That's Vizag. Again, significant growth, and it's going to become even more significant as the corridor, the petrochemical corridor, builds out along the coast. That's Trivandrum. That's Kannur. Again, Kerala has some issues on population projections in the long run. Ludhiana, Nashik, Vijayawada. So when we're talking about the new capital, that's Guntur here. So the new capital region is in this area. We have colleagues who are currently looking at that. Of course, we were centrally involved in this whole big program with Andhra Pradesh. The partition of the state was done effectively in this room and the room upstairs. Madurai, Banaras, again classic kind of development. Meerut, Faridabad as an outcrop of Delhi. You can see that. Rajkot, Jamshedpur. Now it's interesting. I mean, when you start, after a while, you start feeling sort of fatigued because all of these numbers, we're still at the 1.5 million. That's Srinagar. They're the first big hill city that we have. Of course, in the plains of the Jhelum, you can see the areas that are there. Of course, many colleagues have worked on flooding in the city. That's Jabalpur also going. That's Asansol. These are all plus 1 million. Fine. That's Allahabad. Again, a very small town when I first went there. Then Dhanbad here. Aurangabad, Amritsar. Of course, if you extend it, you can see other side of Pakistan. Jodhpur, the first big desert city we have, 1.3 million, lots of serious challenges here. Ranchi, Raipur, Kollam, Gwalior, Durg, Chandigarh, sort of India's great sort of experiment. We have colleagues from here, and you can see Panchkula, you can see the extension, the big challenge that the Corbusian plan has from space. You can see that, and of course, I'm just showing you 1 year. The atlas actually that I'm showing you section has time series. That's Trichy, that's Kota, again on the edge of the desert. That's Mysore. You can see the sort of influence of planning in Mysore. Bareilly, Guwahati, again also growing, lots of development both on the Shillong side and further to Upper Assam. Tirupur, Sholapur, Hubli and Dharwad, you can see twin cities there now being sort of more connected. Salem, Aligarh, very dense concentration. Moradabad, Bhubaneswar, Jalandhar. We're down only to the million. Huh? Remember, India, this is what people don't realize. We have like 70 or close to 70 odd million cities. At Warangal, Bhiwandi, these are close to a million. Dehradun is gone completely in control of, and some colleagues are from somewhere up here. Saharanpur, Siliguri, Gorakhpur, Guntur, Cuttack. And you can see the fraction of the settlement of Pondicherry, all the different areas. Very difficult for us to do the boundaries because it's really lots of enclaves. Jammu, Bikaner, again another desert city. You can see the desert in the background. This is sort of Amravati in Maharashtra, probably the real Amravati, not the new one. Mangalore, Belgaum, Bhavnagar, Firozabad, Jamnagar. You can see the refinery out here. Durgapur, Malegaon, Nellore, Bokaro, Kolhapur, Rourkela, Ajmer, Nanded, Jhansi, Gulbarga, Erode, Ujjain, Sangli, Tirunelveli, Vellore, Rajahmundry, Udaipur, Gaya, Kakinada. You can see the offshore thing. This is where the KG basin, the first, can't see them there, but the drilling ships are out there. Jalgaon, Davangere, Akola. That's a top 100. Fine. So now, what do we have in the atlas apart from that? And this is an interesting part of the story here. Basically, if I show you Mumbai, we have something that corresponds roughly to the 2000 census. It depends on satellite imagery. This is a 2001 sort of land use, and this is 2016. The closest that we could get to the current point of time. The red is the built-up areas, the green is the agriculture or forest areas, and the blue is the water in some cases. This is Powai, the lakes, Tulsi, Virar, Powai lakes as far as that's concerned. So when you look at this in the atlas, what are we trying to see? We're trying to show you two or three things. The first thing is how land use change is taking place. So this map on the right hand side here is a land use change map. So you can see the new extensions, things that have come up in the last, these 3 periods here. So you can see New Bombay, new areas building out. The new airport, I think, is somewhere down here. This is parts of Thane that are building out at that end. So if you look at it analytically, the red is, if you look at Greater Bombay, 28% built up area in this region in 2000, growing to 45%, growing to 50%. Okay. The green areas, of course, are more or less, and this will vary, of course, because of satellite image, but we're losing a lot of other land. This is a big battle that you're having here around the mangroves, around the CRZ, which is a big issue. These are the population projections. So we have this analytical frame now for 100 odd cities. This gives you a sense of what's actually changing and what's not changing. But more important, it's showing us that there's a method that we can use that uses satellite images to actually track these processes. We are now using, hopefully in the next round, when you see this next year, my colleagues will get a little bit of machine learning into this, and we can actually hopefully track this certainly on an annual basis, but maybe on a 6-monthly basis. So you can really see, and this is all of our stuff is public information. We're hoping to make this available on a map server, so anybody anywhere in the country can look at what's happening and see the changes.
What's that last portion? 10%, 20%. What does it
See, these are lots of other categories. Where are you guys? Teja, come out in front. Why isn't the team that works on it? They would come in the built up areas. Let me show you Delhi for a second. Sorry. Yeah, they come in built up areas. Absolutely. Yeah. Guys, what are others? How did you misclassify them? Come on.
All the other ones that you don't see as built up green and
Why didn't you come in front? The team that's done this work should come in front. I'm just showing what the hell you guys come on.
I could simply put it as whatever is not built up green and water is all others. So let's say any kind of so there are, let's say if you have to classify, let's say between built up there are a lot of densities that we can see, and if we have to, let's say, classify let's say river beds as something that you can put as others, which is not either built up, completely built up or anything, but it's a dry land without any kind of a vegetation is something that you can put it up as the others. A vegetation will, let's say, include croplands, forest lands and all of that. We haven't misclassified it and trying to keep it simple to compare. The whole idea was to get the built up out and to keep the other ones because the whole idea is to track built fabric here. That's what we've simply tried to do.
Water bodies?
Water is a separate. Sorry?
No, the water is here. This is water. Yeah, the lakes will come up here. I'll just show you Bangalore in a second. So how is this done? Basically, the satellite. This is from Landsat data, because Landsat gives us the longest time series. It's a US satellite that's there. We have our own satellites that give us better stuff that's there. In fact, one of the pieces of work that we'll be doing is to try and integrate the two series over time so that we can connect Indian satellites at much higher resolution to this. Again, nothing sort of brilliant in that sense. Yeah.
Water and other water bodies such as rivers and all depends on the time of the year also. So built is something that is constant that you can see, but water bodies and vegetation is changing through the year, so you might find some differences. Yeah.
So that's Delhi here. You can see the changes that are taking place in Delhi. This is one of the relocation areas towards the north, lots of development on the outside there. Sorry, I'll just take you to, yeah, that's Kolkata. Here again you can see lots of peripheral development. This of course is the KMC area, but as we know, Kolkata's, so there are 24 different sort of urban areas in this, but you can see this extensive development that's taking place both in the Salt Lake area and otherwise on the periphery. But systematically across this, one of the pieces of work which again if you see the atlas is we're trying to measure what's happening within the metropolitan boundary and what's happening outside. So you get a sense of sprawl, which is very important in terms of metropolitan governance. So that at least you can pick up in some senses. And sorry, let me just change that. That's Chennai. Here, that's what I was saying. Chennai is really, really striking. Even though relatively the growth of Chennai compared to Delhi is not very significant in terms of population numbers. Yeah, so these are two different projections that are there, a high and low projection based on historical data. So the black line here is the data till 2001, which is for the census. So we have a full data set that's here. In fact, I mean, the draft of the atlas is here. Some of you want to look at it. The full data table is there, and there are two projections that are used for that.
Just to get a sense of the scale, the extent that you see is 60 kilometers by 60 kilometers. That is constant across all the cities, and we try to put the center city at its center. So that's just wanted to point it out for comparison between the cities.
Okay, so let me do Bangalore. So you can see the development, the impact of the peripheral ring road, peripheralization of the city very, very clearly here in the change map. Also you can see the almost a doubling of built up area. So at one end there's hollowing out and there's sprawl happening and there's peripheralization happening at the same time. So I mean these are empirical processes that one has to check and see. Sorry, this is Hyderabad. Here also you can see massive growth happening, but this is much more polycentric. So each city almost has its own character in some senses, driven by its own thing. So I mean that's the reason that we really have to understand bodies of practice and sort of research that understands each city. You know, Hyderabad and Bangalore, roughly the same population size, but each of them have very, very different dynamics as far as that's concerned. That's Pune. There again, the Chinchwad question that's there, and again lots of peripheral development that's happening in various areas. This reflects land markets. Look at that, there 20% going to 55% in like 15 years or so. See a infilling that's there, and you know whole range of developments. You can see what's happening on that. That's Surat. There again you can see this, you know, again filling up. When many of us worked in Surat, some of these areas were not inhabited, but you know extensive development around this as you take place. Again similar kind of trends, but obviously this fluctuation is because of changes in the satellite images over time. That's Kochi, just to give you a sense of something different, very different pattern of urbanization here, lot of infill happening, but again if you look at the built up in that image, again this doubling that you're seeing literally in under 2 decades or so. That's Jodhpur, much more, you know, it's constrained because of the desert. So you can see the relationship between the city and other factors that are around it. And that, sorry, let me show you Guwahati. There you can see again lots of infill and development, but look at this, look at this massive growth that we're seeing in Guwahati at that point of time. So all that we're saying here is that, you know, this is not a great piece of work. I mean, Bhatt has been doing this for 25 years. But the thing is that we now have a comparable set for the top 100. We have to eventually do this for the top, whatever, 700-800 to get a full sense of what's happening, so that it becomes a regional and territorial development question that's there. But it can be done. It can be done by Indian, you know, with Indian data, and we'll see what's happening. So that's the first thing that I want to show you. That's a big picture at the top end. These cities collectively produce about 40% of India's GDP, or something of that order. If somebody here is going to correct me, my colleagues have worked on that. So, you know, we have about, just to give you a sense of the scale, we have 6.5 lakh settlements in the country. So most of them are villages. We only have about 8,000, 7,900 urban centers. I'm showing you just 100 of that. So it's 100 out of 6.5 lakhs. This 100 produces 40% of India's GDP. It has about 200 million people living. They have about 200 million people living in. So we have to get a sense of scale, which is really what we work on here in some senses. Okay, sorry. Where are we? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to now, you know, having given you a sense of what's happening a little bit in the urban context, I'm going to start looking at the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a framework that came out of the work that, you know, many people have done over the last 20-30 years, trying to connect up the social, the economic, and the sort of ecological or environmental questions, because they're all considerably intertwined. When many of us started work maybe 20-30 years ago, this country had almost half the population that it has just now. We're 1.3 billion people. We're going to go to 1.6 in the next 15-20 years or so. So we're going to be the largest population in the world. I mean, we're about to overtake China in about 10 years' time. That's a simple story as far as that's concerned. And in fact, when we think regionally, if you look at India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, Pakistan has just got its census at 200 million. Bangladesh is very close behind. We already have in South Asia a population size that is significantly larger than China. 1.3 for India, 200 for, so we're at 1.7 billion in this region. That's the context that one has to sort of look at this in. So this is the framework that, you know, was settled about 2 years ago. In fact, just it's a matter of interest, since many of my colleagues were involved in this. This goal here on sustainable cities and communities, the framing of this goal actually happened in this room. There was in 2014 January, we had a consultation here which came out of the Bangalore Declaration. You know, I was sitting in that side of the room. This is the global framing of what all the countries in the world have agreed on to try and sort of bring together everybody in the world and end poverty, end hunger, provide, you know, universal health care to everybody, to provide universal education, enable gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable energy, decent work, a whole range of things on infrastructure development, reducing inequality, etc. So this is the global framework. India is a key signatory to this, and as a signatory to this, in fact, I mean, you know, when I was there at the UN General Assembly when the Prime Minister sort of, he made a fairly important speech, and of the 5 big things that he said, cities were one of the 5. Because he sees that as something that's very critical to try and deliver this whole agenda. The challenge with this is, it's a global agenda, it's universal, it's interconnected, and the way it was negotiated, pretty much everything is at the same level. So the challenge for us who are working with implementation is, how do you connect one thing to the other implementation, and how do you prioritize? Because, you know, resources are quite limited. And what I'm going to show you just now is a framework that you know, colleagues have put together from SDSN. IIHS is also part of SDSN. This comes from you know, a piece of work that was released earlier this year at the High Level Political Forum. Chandrika was sort of involved with this, as many of us were, which basically is providing this universal agenda, which, you know, deals with all people everywhere. But there are 3 very interesting ideas inside this. The first idea, which I think is going to be very challenging, and I think we're struggling with this globally at the moment, is the idea that not only are you going to deliver on these fantastic things, including climate change, but you'll do that in a way that no one is left behind. Okay? We've talked about this. In India, we talk about it in terms of Antodaya, a whole range of other things. Gandhi is central with that, with the schema that's there. But to actually operationalize this in policy is really tough. We know when we're doing a pulse polio program, to get to 90% is like almost impossible. But if you want to get the impacts that you want, you have to get to 95% or otherwise. Those of us here who work on water and sanitation, specifically on sanitation, our public health benefits only start happening when we get coverages in the high 95s and above. So being able to get that kind of universal coverage is very tough institutionally. It takes a lot of resources, and it takes a lot of innovation. So that's the political commitment that's been made, to leave no one behind. But there's also 2 other things that are quite important. I'll do the last one first, and that is to leave no ecosystem behind. And why are we saying no ecosystem? Because the global impacts that we have as a species are absolutely unbelievable. I'll show some things to you when we do the sections on climate change. You know, after the Second World War, when the UN was created, when this whole development story started, there were about, you know, almost 3 billion people in the world. We now have more than double that. We're going to go to 9. So the human impact on ecosystems, on agriculture, on water, on a whole range of, and forests have become so severe now that they're coming back to impact us, not only in our local environment because of congestion and pollution and all that kind of stuff that's there, but like work that Tuhin and other colleagues are doing, actually fundamentally altering the ecosystems basis of many, many different regions. For India, of course, drought is probably the most significant challenge, but in the kind of areas that they're working with, in, let's say, in the Sundarbans, you have a whole range of other issues because of subsistence, because of flooding, a whole range of other questions. So we are really having significant impact on ecosystems. So if we don't actually protect ecosystem services and things behind that, we are going to be in very deep trouble as a country, and you know, as let's say as a species. And something else which we introduced actually in some senses in this room, like I said, about 3 years ago, was the idea not only of inequality, which is no one being left behind, but also spatial inequality. Because the way that governments often work is organized in the way that governments are organized. So you deal with health, and then you deal with education, and very rarely do you bring health and education together to say, look, you know, girls need to have separate toilets in schools. Very simple idea. I remember when we had this discussion in the 10th plan, people thought I was crazy, saying, look, if you don't put women's, girls and teachers' toilets into school, it won't work, because everybody has to have toilets. Just because you have one toilet doesn't mean it will actually work for everybody. So the idea that spatial inequality is actually brought in is very, very important. In fact, we have a big challenge in India, because I think post-liberalization, we have thrown out this idea of, you know, of regional development out of the frame. You know, before the 90s, essentially there was a very strong focus in India on regional development, on backward states, on actually providing, I mean, sometimes odd things like freight subsidies and equalization and stuff like that. But partially because of the way that liberalization worked, we basically assume that everybody's on the same page. But even in the state, for example, the differentials between Bangalore and Mysore, between Mysore and smaller towns, and between Mysore and them and the rest of Karnataka, and you know, we have many people who worked here in northern parts of Hyderabad, Karnataka. The differentials are so large that if you do not address these regional development questions, you have a serious problem. And like I showed you earlier, 100 cities, just 100, we got tired by the time we saw the 100, concentrate 40% of economic output, but they have 200 million out of 1.3 billion people. Okay, so that's something that we have to think of very carefully. So this framework also starts asking us to think about spatial inequality. But unfortunately, in academia, in practice and in governments, we don't understand how to do that. And I think that's why most of us here are really, really important, because how do we start thinking in terms of governance of dealing with this question is quite important. So I'll just quickly take you through the frame. This is what the global frame looks like. Some of you have seen this before. This is stuff that was released by colleagues from SDSN earlier in the year. This basically looks at all the goals. It's a integrated framework. This is poverty, this is climate change, this is cities, and it looks at the performance against these goals in different parts of the world. I've just taken Sweden, which is at the top of the index. This gives you the per capita GDP. This gives you the Human Development Index, which is a precursor to this whole framework. This looks at biocapacity. It's a proxy for environmental conditions, and this looks at the population. In fact, I showed this about 10 days ago in Sweden, and we were there for the IPCC, and there was a very interesting debate in Sweden itself on differentials in terms of health access across the country. We had some of the best medical people there. We were talking. So I'm just going to flash you through very, very quickly different countries to give you a sense of what's happening across the world, and of course we'll end with India. So I'm going to step back for a second. That's Germany at number 6. Basically the idea here is that if you have this thing filled out, you're close to where you want to get. These goals are meant to be met by 2030. The idea, of course, is to have them holistically delivered. And as you can see, these high income and sort of northern European countries are much better than many other parts of the world. Okay, that's Germany. That's France at number 10. Also similar, but you can see some inequality in France, some serious consumption questions, some environmental challenges there. That's Japan. You start seeing interesting things. Japan is an island country, so serious issues on environment. This is life below water, this is life above land. Some questions as far as climate change is concerned, a lot of questions on consumption, and interesting, and this is a reflection of Japan, gender inequality is much higher than other places. There are also interesting questions. We think that we are the only country that's experiencing challenges of hunger, but obesity creates its own problems, which is now becoming a very serious problem even in our own country as we're dealing with that thing. But even in the high income countries, it's a question. That's the UK. Again, you can see here lots of issues here, especially on consumption, a whole range of questions about infrastructure. In some senses, the UK is an underdeveloping country just now. And some parts of it, regional inequality in the UK is very, very severe, especially in the north, and that's one of the reasons that we have the Brexit vote there. Again, this great example that we are often quoted in this country of how we should build new cities and develop new regions. Very, very serious challenges in Singapore, as you can see. It's an island, for God's sake. It can't have everything. It has fundamental constraints. It's a singularity in some senses. It's doing very well on some counts, but not so well on others. And you can see again, we try and replicate our model on the basis of 6 million people who live on an island. I think we're in some trouble, because it's not only this that's important, or that, because Singapore has fairly good capacity. The question is, it's fundamentally unsustainable as a culture and a region. That's China, which in effect will define what the world will do some point of time. That's China's GDP per capita, almost 4 times ours, also doing much better on health and education. Again, population of 1.3 billion people, serious biocapacity issues, and that's why we're having a lot of regional tensions in some senses. There is water movement that's going to go from the Tibetan Autonomous Region to Xinjiang. There are many things that China is doing. It's putting a lot of its environmental burden on other parts of the world. A lot better than many other developing countries in terms of its overall level of development. That is, how full that circle is filled out, fine. And they've dealt with some fundamental things that we haven't, like let's say poverty. That's a big shift. Urbanization in China has made that happen. That's Indonesia, a country that we often forget, but it's very important. 260 million people, very close to us in some senses. A multicultural society that's under some tension at the current point of time. Again, you see that their biocapacity issues are much less than us. That's South Africa, a very divided country in some senses. You can see the inequality equations in South Africa really jumping at you in some places, and that's us. Okay, so we're sitting at 116 in the global rankings. US is at 42, and our biggest challenges, of course, apart from this is PPP numbers. So the nominal numbers will be at about under 2,000. This is an HDI, which is our biggest challenge. We have not really done what we should be doing on education and healthcare, and of course we have big challenges on biocapacity, which we'll see later. So in some senses, that's a global picture. Fine, this is done. We've been part of this process, etc. The question for us across the world is, how do you take this global picture? And this is fine, and it's great. You signed up, and it's nice things. Somebody will make a speech in the UN, etc. How do you try and operationalize it? There are really serious challenges because our data systems don't allow us to do that. So our colleagues, where are they hiding at the back? Jyoti, Anna, Garima, of course, is in Sydney today. They've done, this is almost a year's worth of work that I'm going to show you just now. Hopefully, I mean, it should have been a little bit faster, but anyway, it's a fascinating piece of work where I'm going to show you just now how you can, rank the states. We've used the same kind of methods that we used otherwise, but our data sets are quite different. Essentially, there's data that is collected across 27 odd states, across whatever we had data for. So the urban index you see is thinner than the rural index, than the all India, the all state index, let's say, because the data was just not available. We've used standard official data, so this is comparable. Anybody can do this kind of stuff that's there, and we've selected a set of indicators which are not, they're as close as possible to the global indicators. So the sets are not exactly comparable because our data systems are different from some of the international data systems, and this is where the convergence will start happening if you want comparability. But remember, we're at the beginning of a 15-year cycle, so hopefully the systems will improve and we'll get some new things of dealing with that. And we've used a sort of equal weights index, we've rescaled, and we've done lots of fancy statistical things which people can talk about later if they're interested in. This is how we actually do it. This is the data set that you see. So this is goal 3, which is basically universal healthcare. The title of the goal is ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages. They picked up 3 sets of indicators here. The total childbirths undertaken under skilled supervision, availability of latrines. This is environmental health in some senses. You can see the tracking state by state that's here. There is the All India total in the solid line that's there. The All India urban line you can see much more clearly here. So in urban areas in India, the average All India numbers are much higher than, the urban numbers are higher than the All India numbers, which can be expected in some senses. We understand this. And these are all states in clusters: north, northeast, east, south, west, and central. So there are 27 states there, and we've got the state total, the first dark bar, the state urban, to be able to look at that. We're trying to unbundle what's happening between the urban and the rural. So 3 indicators, I showed you the other 2 earlier, and this is some proxy of this of what's happening on lifestyle diseases, because India has this very interesting challenge. In fact, colleagues here are working on this question in informal settlements, that we have a dual burden. The idea is that India has lots of infectious disease, which is true. Absolutely, lots of people die and lots of young children die because of infectious disease. But the big issue for us also now is that we have, because of both lifestyle and nutrition, we've gone to all of these high status grains like rice and wheat, etc. in some places. So we have serious challenges on the nutrition side. This is the diabetes, let's say, epidemic that's building out in India at the moment. In fact, we will have probably the largest diabetic population in the world some point in time. Not a nice thing to happen. You bring all these things together and you get an index. So there's a weighted index. We can describe that later. I'm not going to go into the details again. Between Anna, Jyoti, etc., if people want to figure out how we've done this, we can spend more time on it. I'm just going to show you what the performances look like. There is a document here which may be in your text. It's here, which does this. So if you want to look at this, you can see it here. Yeah, is it there? Yeah, it's there. Great. But I'll show it to you on screen. So that's HP. There are a couple of HP Carter people here. HP is coming on top of the rank. Now, what do we see here? Same thing, same framework like I showed you earlier for the global ones. Global goal 1, poverty, health. The urban goal is here. The grays are basically things that we don't have data for. We're not reporting on them. So this shows us what we need to do to improve our data systems. This is the urban rank, because we're interested in urban. This is the All India rank that's there. This is not completely equivalent to the global ranking that's there. The score is here at 74, the rank is at number 1, within brackets is the score. So that's all India. Himachal, this is all Himachal, urban and rural. So that's like number 1 in terms of the ranking. Then Goa at number 2. So again, from the urban context, you can expect that, small population, etc. Sikkim at number 3, again small, at least on the urban side, small population. That's Delhi, India's highest per capita city or city-state. Kerala, I mean these are all sort of in some senses known things. That's Maharashtra, okay. And you can see here, interesting variations on a whole range of things. Of course, everything depends on how you choose the indicators, but this is a comparable frame, so you can see what's happening. So we can take a little while if we will look at it. At a whole range of questions here. Again, poverty questions, hunger questions still there, healthcare issues in Karnataka compared to other states. Same thing, water and sanitation could be doing a lot better, etc.
Is in terms of total population or percentage?
This is all. Yes, this is total urban. So we're using, for example, we'll use the census indicators to look at the proportion. So if you take proportion as the index, I mean if I go back to
is it in terms of rate of urbanization?
No, it's not rate of urbanization. This is a static point for 2017. Yeah, it's the closest data set that we have for the current point in time. This is not dynamic. This is a static shot. I'm really happy that Dr. Ravindra asked that question. It's a static shot. Eventually what we need to do is we need to get a dynamic process. In fact, if I look at the planning process, if we look for example at questions of, let's say, universal healthcare, that's there. In a sense, what it's telling you is, if you want to get here by 2030, you're just about halfway away from what's happening. So, you've got 13 years, how do you set your targets? The useful thing about this frame is, it has targets, like we said, universal sanitation, which is coming both on the health side and it's coming, let's say, on the urban, or the other side, let's say. If you're at 80% of that thing, you know what your target is like, how far you have to get. Again, the idea here is this is not perfect. This is a way of trying to look relatively at how we're doing in different states, and you can see a considerable difference. Again, for those of us who work in development, these are not new ideas or they're not new surprises. Some states are on the top and they've been there for a long time. Some states are at the bottom, and that has not changed very much. And that's a bit of a surprise in some senses. But what we're able to do just now is we can look at this holistically across all dimensions in one diagram. So if you're looking, in a sense at a dashboard, this gives you a very interesting sense of where you are and what you need to get to do. So when you're looking at the whole country, and you can, or even a region, the method, of course, is ideally applicable from district level upwards, but we don't actually have the data that's there. I mean, the next step for us is to develop this district-wise, not for us to do. I mean, we're trying to show how it can be done, but basically statistical systems for states should be able to do this at district level and for every city. The big challenge is, for example, we know that on the urban end, we have almost no data on urban economic activity, employment. It's just not there. Fine. So then half of these things we can't actually calculate, while other things like health may be there because our systems build up that way. So I think there's a whole range of questions that we hopefully will address over today and otherwise of how we build up these processes and build up these statistical systems district by district, in fact block by block. I mean, all the work that we do when we're doing, if you're a person who's managing something at the state level, if you're district magistrate or whatever DC in particular states, you are dealing with this entire problem block by block, region city by city in that place. So it gives us an idea of how to deal with this question territorially, which is a new thing. That's Haryana. Again, you can see interesting trends there, some big issues that you can see. That's Tamil Nadu. It's interesting. One would imagine that Tamil Nadu would be much higher in the rankings. But because we've ranked it according to on the all India rankings, Tamil Nadu is number 6, but on the urban ranking, Tamil Nadu is not doing very well on some things. This is interesting stuff that sort of comes out. That's Meghalaya. You wouldn't imagine that Tamil Nadu and Meghalaya would sit together at the same urban context in some sense. That's Uttarakhand. That's Arunachal, etc. So anyway, the framework is there. I'm sure people are going to take lots of pot shots at this thing because it's developing. But at least the idea here is you can do this stuff, you can look at it holistically, and you can start comparing, and maybe then we can start looking at the larger questions of political economy, financing, incentives, institutional processes, etc. that understand that. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but you can go all the way down. Now we're coming to the bottom end of the ranking. You have Odisha, Jharkhand, West Bengal, very big state, but serious challenges there. This of course is a matter of history also. because the CPM has historically neglected urban areas, and we're finding that lag now after 30 years of stuff on that. Sorry, where am I going? Chhattisgarh, UP. Basically, you know, if you fix a lot of things in UP, the whole country will change. UP is bigger than UP is bigger than many other regions of the world, than the US, than Europe, etc., etc., etc. And that's Bihar, you know, which is kind of where we would expect it to be somewhere towards the bottom end of the spectrum. So this in some senses, UP and Bihar give us the sense of the challenge that we have both in urban areas. Of course, both states have relatively low urban populations. But the question is, if we want to create want to create employment, and we want to deal with a whole range of human development questions, we have to deal with it in UP and Bihar. If we're not able to deal with it there, we don't add up to very much. So anyway, that's a frame. I'm just showing it to you because what I'm saying is, if we have a comparable frame, you may or may not agree with it. We'll have lots of fights about whether the indicator was right or wrong, and you know, all the academic discussions we have. So what do we get from this? This is interesting. So this is a comparison of rural and urban. Basically, around 4 things: on hunger, on water and sanitation, on work, on energy, and on on institutions. Urban areas are better than rural areas. I mean, this is the big picture. Again, it's obvious, yeah, but we have the basis to say that. But there are other things in which in rural areas, notionally, or let's say, are doing at least the same level of otherwise, and this is somewhat surprising. On health, for example, and this is the whole question of, do we need to go in and examine non-communicable diseases? Do we need to examine lifestyle questions which are somewhat less in rural, and even though you have poorer rural healthcare systems than urban areas, but urban health systems are seriously challenged. Same thing in terms of education. This is the thing that surprised me a little bit, and this is a big push that we've seen from the early 90s. You know, the story that we've seen after, I mean, I worked fair amount in UP and Bihar. When you go now, that's the big shift I would see from the early 90s to now. सुबह जो है लड़कियां स्कूल जाती हैं, कुछ जगह साइकिल पे जाती हैं और वैसे भी जाते हैं. I'm just saying that's a big shift that's taking place. So you're seeing a big shift on education. There was a big differential earlier, and interestingly, I know gender equality question, I think, is a big research question on that sense. And then of course on 2 other things, this is again obvious for those of us who work in urban areas, but rural people don't understand this. There's a big discourse in India which says that rural poverty is worse than urban poverty. We've known this for a long time. Amitabh has written on this extensively for many years, that urban poverty is worse than rural poverty. Okay, this is a new thing that people are discovering, and similarly inequality, like I'll show it to you in about 5 minutes time. Urban inequality is much more severe than rural inequality at the current point of time. Even though we have endemic caste, we have gender inequalities entrenched in rural society. This is a big picture. We can write 10 papers on whether it's okay or not, but I'm just giving you a sense of that. So we're getting a differential analysis that comes from this process, and like I'm saying, we can do this for every state, notionally for every district, and then you start understanding what can actually happen, and it helps inform how do you start the process of implementation and change making. Because at the moment, many of our policies are up in the air, or they're target based, or they get announced at various points of time politically. But if we have the data and the analysis, even though we can, we can fight about which one is right or wrong, we can actually have a good debate about what needs to get done. And of course, the big question for urban, there are a whole set of goals for which we have no data at all. So this is the real question for statistical systems, for people working, in government and in other institutions, and those of us who work on research. So we know, इसके बारे में हमें कुछ भी नहीं पता. We don't have data on this stuff in a systematic way which is comparable across states. Even though we have the Forest Survey of India, we have various other agencies that are doing this, we don't have areas. These are obviously critical areas for increasing research and building out stuff and building capacity in public systems to deal with it. So at least we've got a big picture. How is urban better than rural? How is rural better than urban? What are worse in urban areas, and what we don't have? So that's the useful utility of this exercise that is there. And again, these are obvious things. My colleagues have worked on this stuff here, which are the best performing states, etc. We're not competing on, like India Today does, but I'm just giving you a sense of, again, there are no big surprises here. Those of us who worked in these states know that these issues are not new. So what we do have, and it's there inside the document here, and you can pull it out, it's not so easy to see, is this pull out that's here. So we put it together. If you want to look for a dashboard for the country, it's here. There are 2 sheets that are here. There's one sheet that's on the top here, which basically looks at all the states, and it looks at red, yellow, green. So this is just again a synoptic thing. If you want to look at a high picture, you can see what's happening by state and by sector. One for all India, and the other one for urban. And you can see the urban set is smaller because we have less data. Fine. So we now have, at least notionally, it's not the best thing in the world. We have a dashboard to say, मोटा मोटा क्या हो रहा है, क्या नहीं हो रहा है, where are we in this framework, and for the first time we can bring together all dimensions of development. It's not just urban or rural, we can look at it in detail, and in principle, if you're an administrator or you're somebody making an investment or you're a civil society or institution, you can say, look, where are the gaps, what can I deal with, and where do I need to focus on, whether it's by state or by sector. And when you start looking at the interface between the two, you can start looking at whether there are real challenges that you need to put together. So as I said, this is a framework, it's a model. There are many challenges with models, but at least it gives us a sense of what's happening, and we're putting it out there for people to to challenge in some senses. So that's there. So in a sense, we have a frame to start talking about. When we're looking at between now and 2030, how do we get from here to there? It becomes much more specific. Like I said, if we can drill down to district level, we're talking about a cluster of 5 districts. How can I deal with questions of endemic poverty in some places? How does it link to healthcare? So we have a frame that we can talk about this, so we can talk more concretely about whatever it is. So I'll stop there for a few minutes to take questions, and then I'll get on to some of the deeper analytics that sit behind that, some of the analytical work that my colleagues have done on this thing. Any quick questions that people may have, any reflections? I can put this stuff back in on this. We have mics here, so yeah, Chandrika. Yeah, sorry, you've got a mic. Oh, great, good. Thank you. Yeah, go for it.
So thank you. This was very comprehensive. When we've done the index and presented in other countries, one of the questions that come up is regional benchmarking, right? So how do you look at comparisons of performance in one country relative to either the region or countries at a similar state
level of development?
Is that something that you've looked at? Is that an interesting question in the Indian context, and what are there some lessons that we can think of from that?
So there are two things. I mean, maybe whatever Jyoti can come up and help. So there are two things that within the country. I think we have broadly. Come, take the mic. No, it's your work. I'm just doing the show and tell here. So within the country, I think we have at least some degree of comparability. The challenge is, if you want to use this to compare it with Pakistan and the index that I show on next to Bangladesh, is difficult because the indicator set is not the same. So this is where the global indicator set, this whole debate that's happening just now within the global community of how you bring this stuff together is a big issue. There's a disconnect between the two. So that's why we call it the India index. Want to give some examples of how indicators are different? There's a whole lot of stuff these people have done. Go ahead.
Actually, we haven't done any benchmarking right now because we really did not find enough consensus on benchmarks, and the aim of this analysis was to simply put out what was available and then move ahead and start a discussion on benchmarks. And I think the initial challenge was to find indicators that we could use for the urban in the first place. So yeah, to talk about benchmarks, we honestly did not, we didn't think we were in the place to actually decide which benchmark to choose for this particular analysis.
So the core challenge there, at least in the urban space, is comparability is a serious issue. I mean, there's a seminal paper that other colleagues had written about 2-3 years ago where we compared 5 different cities across the world, and we just could not find comparable indicators. So you may say that you've got to end homelessness, for example, but homelessness in Manchester, when we looked at Manchester, and homelessness in Durban and in Bangalore are totally different contexts. So here people don't actually have houses, there they have other sets of issues. So how do you want to really harmonize statistical systems across the world? It doesn't make any sense. So the question just now of how to build those metrics where in a particular context, whatever it is, this is a big issue that we had with Latin American colleagues. They said, look, all this stuff is great, but our biggest problem is violence. If I don't look at violence in cities, then I can't look at urban sustainability. Here it may be a question of, large number of people not having water or having very poor sanitation or tenure situation. So this is a big issue. It's a multidimensional question. So there are a lot of analytical questions researchers can spend, there are many PhDs in this thing to try and sort that out. But all that we are saying is within a local context, you can set up a system to do this stuff. You can fight about whether the system is good or bad or X and Y and Z. And then you have to try and present it with all the caveats. They have a paper full of caveats, as good academics should do. But at least you can start comparing something that looks a little bit like something else in the same country. Yeah? Make sense? Okay, any other quick responses?
So this is a question about the methodology, where when there is an urban SDG, why did we choose to map all the other SDGs in urban areas in India? So is it again because of data availability, because there was an exercise across various cities in the world where the meeting of the urban SDG was measured? So is that something we plan to do in the future, or what? I mean, if you can reflect on the urban SDG versus measuring of these SDGs in urban areas.
So you've come into a deeply political space. So in the negotiations, basically there was a lot of pushback, and we faced it this time earlier this year. I was in General Assembly in September. Basically, most of the countries did not want to have a separate goal around urban areas. Okay, initially, 3.5 years ago, partially because of the global discourse, and the question of separating the urban and the rural. So the urban SDG is actually a very narrow SDG. It's a political space. It's an opening in the door so that some response can happen in the urban context. But in actual fact, if you look at all the things that we're talking about, if you're a municipal commissioner, you're dealing with health, you're dealing with education, you're dealing with solid waste, you're dealing with a whole range of things across this process. So the big fight that's happening politically at the moment, India is a little bit different because our frame of governance is quite different. But in other parts of the world, the big fight really is about local implementation. So local implementation in Latin America, in Europe, and even in some parts of Africa and East Asia is managed by local authorities. India, of course, we are 30% rural and 70% urban. But the local authorities are responsible for, I would say, 2/3 or more of these targets and goals. So for them, how you actually manage the systems is right across the goals. That's the reason why we're putting them together, because that's the way the world is going. In India, of course, it's somewhere else, because basically our cities are managed by state governments and by administrators. So there's no political layer as far as that's concerned. So that's a reflection of the larger institutional politics that we have. So there's one set of people saying, okay, just focus on goal 11, which is not very much. It deals with housing, it deals with transportation. I mean, we framed it. It deals with land. It does not deal with healthcare, education, poverty, etc., which are absolutely central for us, or job creation. In fact, the big political debate that happened was when China stood up and said that we want to keep job creation with industrialization and not with cities. So there's a fundamental flaw in this framework which we're trying to correct this now. The new urban agenda in Habitat 3 tried to correct that, but it's still not sorted out. I mean, these are important policy and political debates, but the system is flawed. Like everything else we do in the policy space, it has many, many problems. There are too many goals, they're confused, but this is a political consensus. So given that you have a political consensus, you have to work with it in some senses if you want to be pragmatic and work in policy. You must know where the limitations lie, because if you don't know where the limitations lie, you'll be captured by it and by the imperatives of that process. So I think it's important for us to have some literacy about this way of looking at things. And again, remember, this is just one framework. You can have 4 different ways of looking at development. So you shouldn't get captured by that. You should always know that we have to be plural, we have to look at our context, we have to fundamentally, see, at the end of the day, it's about implementation. It's not about, fancy things, etc. Yeah, please.
Hi, thanks. I'm looking at what you presented earlier for the 100 cities.
Yeah.
And I think that included the urban.
The peri-urban areas, you can see some of that.
Right?
Yes.
But this, when you're talking about the total and the urban is just municipal limits?
So there are many issues here. It's a very tricky question. They've typically used urban, let's say, where we have census data.
Yes.
We use the census definition. Now the boundary question is a very, very vexed question in any kind of metrics as far as we're concerned. And all of this is confounded by where the boundaries lie. And in fact, in India, there's a very, very serious problem. First of all, we don't have the right boundaries. To find the boundaries, I think that's a big chase that our guys have had. I mean, they spent, a lot of months just finding the boundary.
It keeps changing.
Yeah, it keeps changing. The census boundary is different from the municipal boundary, is different from the development authority boundaries. So which boundary do you use? This is a big debate here. There are a lot of detectives here who work only on finding where the boundaries lie. So there's an issue on that. And plus the other big question, like I mentioned earlier, is that we don't have statistics for a whole range of things in urban areas. The most obvious one is cities. So we have colleagues here who are somewhere who've done this long-term time series on economic output of urban areas, right? Now, you can do that relatively easily for a city like Mumbai or maybe Bangalore, because Bangalore urban is a large part of Bangalore, so you can make some assumptions. But many other places you can't pull them apart, because statistical systems actually don't have that. So there are many, many issues that we have to deal with here. And many of them I would say are data questions. Yeah. Okay, they are signaling to me that I'm going to move ahead. Okay, cool. Okay, we'll pick this up a little bit later. I'm going to go into the next set of things, which is, okay. Arindam is hiding, where is he? Aajao, samne aajao. You have to take the questions. Okay. So basically this is, if some of you were here last year, we've done some interesting pieces of work here. So basically we have the largest single spatial database in the country here, which Arindam, Mohan, etc. have put together over the last many years. This is 2 years ago we presented this map, which basically takes every place in the country, rural and urban areas, and looks at a whole range of variables, largely census variables, to answer your question, because that's where we can bring things together. So you can see a map like this. You know, it's at fairly low resolution. Maybe you can cut the lights a little bit if possible. Yeah, if somebody can cut the lights a little bit, you can get better resolution on this. So this is what we showed you 2 years ago. This is female literacy across the country, so you can see interesting trends as far as that's concerned. So you can see the reds are below the national average, the greens are above, and obviously you can see large urban concentrations. This is 2001, 2011, that's female literacy. And then we developed lots of new technologies, which we showed you last year, which basically enables us to be connected to a gridded data set. So we took it from point locations to grids, and the reason we did that was because there's a whole range of other data that, for example, roads, which don't actually fit into a point data set. There are a whole range of vector processes that sit inside that. So now we have a full data set that actually has the same data in grids, and then we looked at a whole range of driving factors. This is, if some people remember from last year, I explained very quickly, people are not here. We were trying to answer the question of whether urban areas really make a big difference in terms of economic development. So I'll explain this to you a little bit slowly. On this axis, this is a very simple schematic graph. This is the population size of cities. This is the urban rural line. So at the bottom end of this, you have small hamlets of, let's say, maybe, for those of you who are into engineering or maths, this is what we call a log scale. So the difference between this and this here is not 2 times, it's 10 times. Okay, we've done this because usually what happens is when you look at something, it grows exponentially, fine? And when it grows exponentially, it's very difficult to understand what the hell is happening. So when you use a log, then it comes onto a linear line and we can do some fancy maths with it, fine? So this is you know, population size, and this is, let's say, some demographic variable. It could be female literacy or X and Y and Z. We're basically trying to see whether as the population size increases, whether there's a significant impact on, let's say, literacy. Yeah. And it's obvious in some senses because you have better infrastructure that you should have more literacy in urban areas, which is what you're seeing just now. If the line is, the slope is above flat, it basically means there's a larger number of people or larger concentration of people, in this case maybe women or men, in urban areas. Basically what you're trying to understand is whether there's scale economies of urbanization. Okay, so if you're only looking at one thing, which is literacy or employment, should you put more people in urban areas or in rural areas? This is a big policy question. China has answered that question very clearly by saying we're going to put people in urban areas, and we're not only going to put them in urban areas, we're going to put them in very large urban areas. So the question of where along the scale you put them is a very critical question for us. Do you put them in small towns which sit somewhere here, or you put them in large metropolitan centers? Put them in, I mean, I'm being sort of metaphorical there. Where will they land up in? Okay. So what we found, for example, and this is the final graph that's there, this is the line of wealth and this is the line of economic output. So if the slope of the line is not flat but further up, you know, slope upwards, it basically means that a lot more economic activity actually is generated in cities. We know that, but now we have proof of this. We have proof of this on 6.5 lakh places. So we have really solid analytical proof that's happened. This again is fairly well known. This is the basis of which urbanization has been driven in all over the world. You know, there's analytical work that started in the 1930s on this, but we now have the data for this in India, not only for urban areas, because most of the other work has been done. I mean, Krugman won a Nobel Prize for this work in North America. This is the first time it's been done across the rural-urban continuum. No other country has done an analytical piece of work that looks at small villages all the way to large towns. So we know what the analytical figures are in the States and many other parts of the world. Sorry, the cutoff is somewhere here. They don't look at this part of it. So we know the difference in, you see here, it's a huge difference in the economic potential of small places and big places. Remember, it's a log scale. If I were to plot it in log scale, it'll really grow. 1:, maybe, I don't know what the multiplier is. Arindam, what's the multiplier like? 1:10? What's the exponent like? Or 1:20 maybe in some cases. So sorry. So basically whoops, I'm jumping too far. Yeah. What we're saying here is that if you want to really focus on economic growth, to deal with poverty, etc., etc. Cities are much better than other places. Yeah, this is the economic growth line. But there's another line here which is also very, very important, and that is the wealth line. Okay, so if you look at the wealth line, the slope of the wealth line is much steeper in larger urban areas than the economic output line. So in India, we are focused on questions of poverty, which is part of the economic growth story, because you measure poverty on a year-on-year basis, while wealth is something that accumulates over time. So what this really shows us from the 2011 period is that actually our growth differentials are much higher than our wealth differentials. So inequality in wealth is concentrated in large urban centers. Okay, that's what it shows us very, very quickly. So then we try to understand what are the things that drive this. And we found, for example, that at our level of development, the most important drivers are not ICT. This is what they are, telecom and all. It is housing, water and sanitation. That gives you the most bang for the buck. Again, this is obvious. Anybody who walks on the ground knows this. But we have analytical proof of this, and we can break this down state by state, etc., etc. This is what they've done. Same thing. So for us, this is the power. This is the roads line. This is the power line. So road connectivity today is much more important notionally at national level than even access to power. Though I'm not saying access to power is not important. Access to power is very, very critical. Okay, so this was last year's thing. I'm going to quickly run you through lots of funny stuff that's there. So same variables that are there. So essentially what you see here, and I'll take you through this quite quickly. There's a lot of analytical work here. We've now started to look at two different things. This is the kind of thing that I showed you earlier, which is the population scaling function. So this is population, and this is how. But we've also started to look at spatial inequality. Okay, basically the question that we try to address area, if you want to not only leave no one behind, but if you want to leave no place behind, what is the nature of spatial inequality? So we're starting to measure spatial inequality in a whole range of processes. I'll sort of run over it very, very quickly. We're able to map using the same data set, as you can see here. If this is change in population scaling, how quickly things scale, and this is the question of spatial concentration. We're able to measure it state by state and look at the difference between one state and the other. So for example, this, if I'm not mistaken, is Karnataka. So basically in Karnataka there is a high degree of spatial concentration, and we can see that. That's what Bangalore is about. The Bangalore-Mysore differential, a mega city versus a million city that's there. We now can actually measure this along each of these dimensions that we're talking about for each, and this is only for female literacy. We can do the same thing for a whole range of other processes. So I'll just take you through it very, very quickly to give you a sense. So this is the proxy for economic development. We use the NASA night lights data. So that's a map of night light intensity across the country. This is the equivalent thing that you see here, both in terms of population scaling and spatial concentration. So if you see what's happening as far as this is concerned, let me take the state that's way out here. This is this is the All India number that's there. So the change in population scaling versus the changes in concentration is somewhere here. This is probably what? This is West Bengal sitting here. This is Arindam, you'll have to help me out. This is Rajasthan sitting down here. Okay, so we're able to measure just now what is the range of, the big policy question that you have here is, if you put people in urban areas or people migrate to urban areas, you have a certain outcome that's there. You get higher economic development. But the question is, do you cluster all of them into large regions, or do you have a full hierarchy of settlements? This is a critical question that we have in regional development. Do you actually have a full hierarchy, or do you put everybody into a Bombay or into a, and this is I think the question, when we were debating this question with Chandrababu Naidu, that's exactly what he did in Hyderabad. He put all his eggs in one basket in Hyderabad. It created a lot of development, but it creates lots of tension across the state. Eventually that was one of the reasons why the state is actually split politically. So this question of inequality is not only about caste, gender, income, etc. It's also about how it's distributed across space. Because now people have access to a whole range of things, connectivity is different, etc., etc. So we have an analytical frame just now to start looking at this, looking at this question. So this is wealth, and you can see here wealth has got similar kind of clustering in different places, etc. So we're able to measure now both wealth and income and how it's distributed both spatially and otherwise. And then similarly, as we did earlier, we can start looking at workforce participation. This is a really critical question as far as we're concerned in terms of employment. We find that much of India is boxed in one region, and even there is some degree of clustering. So where jobs are created is quite important. So in some senses, the big challenge for us is that we are not creating jobs in these states. Much of the spatial concentration is the negative stuff is happening in the other states. So yeah, exactly, migration is an issue there. Okay. So if you look at road density also, you can see similar kind of things that are here. This is a mapping of road density. So you can, and again, this is, you know, you can see the southern states and western states are doing much better than others. This is of course the spatial concentration, but you find interesting effects. If you look at Bihar and eastern UP, just because the settlements are so densely concentrated, the spatial concentration will be higher. So it's not as if you can only take one variable and look at it. You have to look at the trade-off between them and how processes are actually playing themselves out in different regions as far as that's concerned. Similarly, in terms of course, this is 2011 data. Things have changed a lot in India since then. If you look at mobile telephone data that's there, this looks again at the spatial concentration. Obviously, a lot more connectivity in certain parts of the country than in others. You can see this big hole in some senses in Jharkhand, eastern Madhya Pradesh, parts of Odisha. Here again, we can actually plot and look at what's happening in terms of the spatial concentration versus the population scaling, etc., etc., etc. So, you know, we have the banking numbers also and you can sort of put that out. So, I guess similarly, if you look at caste populations in the country, you can see again a lot of variation, and I mean this is a big question of whether mixing is actually happening, whether there is you know, social mobility. We have some interesting numbers on this. Again, you know, I'm not going to spend lots of time on the math of that. So the question for us is, we now, like I showed you earlier, we now have an analytical frame that you can start looking at these questions. We can actually compare, and you can see multiple variables here. The most important ones are economic output and wealth, and we can start looking at the underlying drivers in each major region of the country to try and see what's actually happening as far as that's concerned. And we can plot it like this also. So anyway, I'm just showing it to you because this is a larger debate. This is a paper that's still in process of publishing. It will probably be out hopefully in the next few weeks and months. But we have an analytical frame now to understand the earlier stuff that we said. So, you know, we saw the outcome in terms of spatial growth and X, Y, and Z. That's capital in some senses in land markets. We saw how development we were working on. We can now look at the underlying drivers in a spatialized sense, because the challenge for us is to move from sectoral targets into looking at organization in space. That's why we're so sort of that's why many of us are sitting in the room. Okay. Can I just have the other things? Best? Yeah. So before I go on to the final connection in the day, I just want to show you a few things that might be interesting. Full screen, please. F11. Take 2 seconds. This might be a little bit of a relief for us. Sorry, it's going to look like a little bit odd, but yeah. Are we live? Can I have the other one also? Can you just give the mics? Yeah. Sorry, it's going to take a little effort. But for all the climate scientists in the room, it's not a big deal. But for everybody else, this is not something that we haven't done here. But I'll just show it to you in a second. Okay. So I'm going to show you on this one. This is a visualization using NASA supercomputer data. Okay. So you can see now all kinds of crazy things can happen because there are lots of creative people in the world who can do. I'll make the maps the same first, and then I'll show you the difference. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So this is the same map. This is near real-time data. In fact, this is probably close to real-time data. What is it showing you? This is showing you the entire world. Fine. This is from the GEOS 5 satellite, which is a NASA satellite that tracks, a satellite system that tracks, and a model that tracks environmental conditions. So, you know, I would say even 5 years ago, you couldn't visualize this stuff. This is real-time data at any given point of time. So I look at it here. What can you see? What you're seeing here are air movements. Okay, so you can actually see how circulation is happening. Very simple things for those of us who have learned this in geography and physics and stuff like that. In the northern hemisphere, the direction of circulation is the other way around because of Coriolis in different locations that are there. So now that we are in winter in the northern hemisphere, if I do spot temperatures here in the middle of Australia, it's sitting at 36 degrees, while if I do spot temperatures here where we are at the moment, it's sitting at 21 degrees. This is real-time data from satellites, so we can actually visualize anywhere across the world. Or if I go to part of the Arctic or Greenland, you'll see here it's minus 41. If I go to Antarctica, it's at minus 35. So I can click on this map anywhere, I can know what the hell is actually happening. Cool. Here you can see the numbers are coming up here. It's telling me, you know, at what location it is, what wind speeds are actually running. So there's a lot of circulation happening in Antarctica at this point of time because that's the way the world system is running. This gives us global temperatures. The reason I put up the global temperature thing is because a lot of the debate that we have just now on climate change is where the temperature going to go. In fact, many of us are involved here. We have 2 or 3 lead authors from the new IPCC assessment. What happens when it becomes 2 degrees? The important thing to understand here, of course, is when we talk about a 2-degree world, we're talking about a 2 degree increase at the equator. Fine. Now 2 degrees increase at the equator can often mean a 6 or 8 degrees increase at the poles. Yeah, and that's the reason why this has become such an important thing at the moment. There was an agreement just last week about movement between, you know, China and Korea right across the Arctic Circle because the Arctic is melting, and there will be almost no Arctic ice in the summer in a few years point in time. So basically what I'm showing here is that you can visualize this stuff. Fine. The question, of course, for us is what is driving this process. Of course, I can look at lots of different variables that are sitting there. This is an open site. You can figure it out. I can look, for example, at the moment at relative humidity, which will tell me now in which parts of the world is it actually raining. Cool. So I look at Chennai at the moment. My RH stays at 94%. So I can tell you that it's raining there. You know, this is a thing that kids can play with. So wherever it is, or for example, we know it's raining like hell here in the equatorial belt, or it's raining now. Oh, it is not. Yesterday when we looked in the evening, it was raining on the west coast of the US. Okay, so at any point of time now, we have the ability because of technology to figure out what's happening, fine, in different parts of the world, fine, that's okay. This is great stuff. It seems very interesting. There's a big cyclonic storm that's building up here. There's some stuff that's happening on this side. Couple was talking about in the morning. This, of course, is, you know, the roaring 40s, and there's sort of lots of interesting stories about how this actually works. So if we looked at this about a month and a half ago, you would have seen the monsoon working. And when you see it like this, you can understand why the monsoon was so important, because at one part of the year, you can move from here to here very easily, and the other part you can move back, because that's the nature of the winds. Or for example, I mean, there was a colleague from Australia, from Perth. We were together at the lead author meeting in IPCC the other day. He was telling me a very interesting story. So this is Perth here. He was telling me that there are over 100 Dutch ships from the 16th and the 17th century who are wrecked off the edge of Perth. And I said, why is that happening? And he said a very interesting thing. It's a very, so they used to start off from here. This is the Cape of Good Hope was a Dutch territory. Remember, they were trying to get here. This is where they were meant to get to. That's the Spice Islands, where they used to take the spice. So how do they do that? They did that by coming down here and using this as a catapult to get them up there. You can see it now, no? I mean, this is obvious stuff. This is where the winds are at the particular point of time. The problem was their navigational skills were very poor at that point of time because they didn't have clocks, fine, and they couldn't actually figure out the latitude and the longitude. So here what's happening is, for example, if you went a little too far as you were going from the Cape of Good Hope and you didn't take off the catapult here, instead of landing there, you land here. Look at this. You land here. Okay, I'm just giving you a sort of practical example of how it works itself out. So navigators across history and time have used this stuff, but they don't have the advantage that we have just now. Now we can know exactly what's happening. We can track it because we have satellites and various other things. Okay, so again, this is very basic stuff for colleagues who are in the climate space. But I'm going to show you something that is maybe a little bit more interesting here. Okay, 1 second. Why is this? You guys have not done F11 on this? Okay. Come on, F11. Just give me full screen on this, please. Is it full screen? Okay. 1 second. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to scroll it to the maximum extent that we can. Same thing. Okay, this is now we actually get this data at this kind of resolution. I've given you the big picture there. So we are at like somewhere down here at the moment. So if I change this variable here for a second, back to relative humidity, yeah, I can see it's raining here. Correct? I can see not only raining, I can tell you the wind direction. Fine. But the story is not there. The story is in something else. In fact, let me, sorry, I'm taking a little time, but I think you'll see something quite interesting here. I'm going to show you something that happened yesterday. What is this? This is the PM10 map of India. Okay, Fine, we've been seeing all this news that's there as far as what's happening. This is just PM10, because if I zoom it out, you can see what's happening in the world. Look at China. Okay, so the question is, what is driving this? Is it the poor farmers in Punjab, like Bhatt was saying, who are burning stubble, or is it something else? The answer lies when I go in. I'll go into another variable in a second for the moment. If I look at chemistry just now, and I look at sulfur dioxide production, what do you see here? I'll zoom for a second and you'll start seeing it. What is this? Can you cut the lights a little bit more? You see a little bit better. Can somebody just cut the lights completely? Sorry. On a high resolution screen you can see it. What is this? What are these locations? Anybody guess? Sorry? Huh? Yeah, steel plants. We can find each, or even if I go down here, you'll find Chennai refinery. You'll find the plumes that you can find for each one of the things that are there. This is sulfur dioxide, and so basically here, Chennai. It's raining there. In fact, if there's no rain, you'll see the plume that goes right across into the Indian Ocean as far as that's concerned. Fine. These are all the industrial things that are there. This is road color. Yeah, great, thanks. Much better there. Got it? So what's driving this process? What's driving this is the urbanization and industrialization. And if you think we are bad, and we are very bad, look at China. So yeah, we have colleagues. I mean, Chandni is here. She's sort of in Myanmar, and pretty much nothing happens there. But if you look at the pollution level, then we can do spot stuff there. So okay, now let's look at SO2 levels in Delhi. 50 micrograms. But I'm going to take you to the thing that's hitting the news at the moment. And obviously, if I showed you in the evening, the numbers will change. Okay, so this is Delhi PM10 at the moment, 1178. Fine. 100 is the WHO standard as far as that's concerned. Yesterday we were looking at spot densities about 1200 or so. We stop. I mean, IMD stops reporting at 1000. That's there. So basically, when you zoom in here, yeah, there you can see it. And I can do, I mean, these are spot checks that you can do from there. You can see all 1470. Got it? 900. So I mean, I know you can look at the precise lat longs that are there. So basically, this process, and this is the reason why it's so important. We often don't understand it. We've been saying this for a long time. We had a lot of trouble. Or the other thing that was very surprising: why is Kerala doing this? Kerala doesn't have very much industry, but Kerala has a decentralized system of settlements. There's a lot of traffic that's happening in Kerala, okay? But the numbers, of course, are much less. This is 100, fine? But you're still getting this plume that's going out here. This is, I just show you those places. It's Trivandrum out there. This is Kozhikode somewhere up towards the north. And this is the Bombay plume that you can see there. In fact, in the evening, if you look at this, you will see the India plume that starts from Gujarat, from Surat, running all the way right across to the Horn of Africa. Of course, it's decreasing. It's starting from 500 and it's becoming 100 there. So what I'm saying is at the current point of time, and you can see this not only here but right across the world. And this is PM10. This is, if I could show you PM 2.5, that's the really bad stuff. And the thing that's going to kill us is the PM1, which you never know what's happening. So I look at the PM1 spot densities here. We're sitting at 360 micrograms. This is the stuff that you can't even see. Okay, fine. So what is driving all this process? And you can see it. What is driving this process is where we live, what we consume, is driven by urbanization. Okay, it's not so obvious to us. We say it in an abstract way, but now we can see it. We can track it on a hour by hour basis, literally, as it interacts with the global climate system. So thankfully, because of a little bit of science and some smart guys who have done this visualization, this data is available. And I think that's what we really have to do as far as, I mean, we have the people who are building India's ESM. So what I keep telling them, we talk about people defending our frontiers and stuff like that. They're very important. But the scientists are also doing that because this is a huge issue for us. We struggled so hard to get the idea of the Indian monsoon into the IPCC assessment because our models are not, I mean, the global models are not good enough to deal with the monsoon. But it changes everything as far as we're concerned. But once you see this stuff, it's obvious. So cities, like I showed you earlier, create this tremendous opportunity, economic development, growth, wealth creation, etc. But they also create this. So while we know this, sorry? Exactly, that's the challenge, no? That's why we have those 18 goals in which climate change is one part of it and environment is one part of it. How do you keep the balance is the question. Exactly, that's the issue, Father. So I just showed it to you because this is what many of us spend decades of our life doing funny stuff on computers to try and visualize. But people don't get it in the policy world. And it's very clear. Now you're sitting in Rajasthan in the middle of the desert, you're wondering why the hell you're getting, lung cancer. But the answer is very simple. You're part of a world system where the wind is bringing it down. And you can see here very clearly, you can see the importance of the Himalayas. You look at all if I take 2.5, the Himalayas, for example, are real, you can see this, nothing on the other side. They're blocking everything on that side, and all the photochemistry, all the people who work on this, Chandra works on this question at IIT Bombay, etc. It's all sitting here inside this basin. Till we understand this thing, and it's not very difficult to understand, and this is common sense kind of stuff, and we can see it, we don't understand what's actually happening and how these things interact. So anyway, can I have the slides back? Can I bring them back?
I think the same would happen on a micro scale when we are cutting out the hills in the cities.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And on the way from the airport, I saw that hill being totally cut off.
Absolutely, or the basins. I mean, this classic thing which people dealt with in Los Angeles. Which one is it, guys? Yeah, okay, great. I mean, where we discovered photochemical scope, there's another Nobel that came out from that. It was because of the LA basin. So, I mean, obviously just now, this is a big issue. There should have been a number of really high-end science research projects to understand pollution for us. This is a matter of national importance. I mean, there are, hundreds of millions of people and tens of thousands children who die of this every year. So, what I'm saying is that these things are connected. So, it's not as if cities are a solution to everything, nor rural areas. They're connected and they're tight, and that's the reason why we're trying to sort of connect the dots in some senses. So just very quickly as far as we're concerned. So what I'm going to address is really the focus of tomorrow and why we're doing this thing. Many of us have been quite centrally involved in the climate process here. So climate is just one part of this. Global environmental change is really the larger frame that's there. And the interesting thing that happened in 2015 was that we got the SDGs and the climate agreement at the same time. And we're trying now to see whether we can integrate the two. And exactly the question that you're dealing with. How do we try and keep the balance? Because when you give up something on this side, I mean, India's big issue, and we're dealing with this in Bonn at the moment, we have colleagues there. The COP is happening at Bonn. India's taking its, as far as I know, last evening, India's taking its conventional position, which is per capita emissions are whatever, we are much better than anybody else, so you guys fix it otherwise. But like I showed you just now, it's a real problem for us. It's not as if, we can hide our head in the sand as far as this is concerned. It's killing us in other ways. It may not kill us in terms of emissions at the current point of time. Sea level will come at the end of the century, but it's killing us in other ways. So the Paris Agreement in a sense is very important for India, because by trying to implement it and change our energy system, we'll actually improve a whole range of other things, which include, basic things like health. Yeah. So, in some senses what we were talking about is trying to bring together development and climate is a precursor of looking at environment. So basically this is the big framework that we're dealing with. This is part of a presentation that I made to the IPCC plenary a few months ago, and essentially what we are saying here is 2 or 3 things. The first thing is the development goals need to be dealt with, but the development goals are over the next 15 or 20 years. The climate challenge is going to happen for the next 100 in some cases. As far as sea level rise is concerned, we're talking about processes that last a few thousand years. Because once the Antarctic ice starts melting, the inertia of that system may take 1,000 or many more thousand years to be able to handle that, to deal with. So the development agenda and environment agenda come together in very concrete terms in the short run. And of course, the Paris Climate Agreement cannot be addressed without our focus on cities. And I guess the big story on that is, and here I'll speak sort of as an individual, not as somebody who's part of the IPCC process, is that we made some agreements. All the countries in the world have come together and essentially said we're going to do something about climate. But the agreement that we signed in Paris is going to take us potentially to a world that is going to be at least 2.75 to 3 degrees warmer in the next 20, 30, 40 years, depending on what we do. What does that mean in practice? What that means in practice is that hundreds of millions of people, and we'll just show you some emergent research which will be discussed tomorrow, in India, especially in the part of India that we're living in, are going to be very seriously impacted in terms of their livelihoods, in terms of their own personal security, and Indian agriculture at least is going to be under severe threat. And we have the numbers in it. The people who've done this kind of stuff are sitting in the room, and we have other people who worked on the economic side. to try and understand that. So basically what we've agreed is to come to a world which is going to actually have very, very severe impacts. So in the last IPCC assessment that we produced in 2014, basically we said if you go, we're currently at 1 degree above the pre-industrial average. So we start from measuring things, the temperature changes from the whatever, the 1880s or so onwards. So at the current point of time, because we put, you know, the average, I could have shown it to you on the climate map, but I will come back to that later. We're at about 400 ppm. So basically we put out, you know, about more than half of what we can to get to 2 degrees. If we get to 2 degrees, we're going to have serious impacts. What we agreed to is much higher than 2 degrees. So India's position in some senses is seriously problematic, not of course for the rest of the world, but also for our people, because the impacts will come back to hit us very, very significantly. So the question is, if we want to get to 1.5, which is the report that many of us are writing at the current point of time over the next 6 or 8 months, what do we have to do? We have to first transform our entire energy system. That's when the sun is up, and we're going to be discussing that tomorrow. There are whole ranges of challenges on storage, etc., that need to be solved. So basically across the world we have to transform ourselves from using non-renewable fossil fuels into using solar. There are a whole range of geopolitical and other challenges with countries like Saudi Arabia, like Russia, etc., because their economies depend on this question. But for us, we have to move out of coal, but it's going to be very difficult for us to move out of coal. There's a very big tussle that we'll have as far as that's concerned. But, and that's the really distressing question of the 1.5 report, even if we move all our coal off into renewables, we're still not going to make it to 1.5 or 2 degrees because of the inertia of economic growth. So we have to do some things which are actually very radical, and that's where the real debate has to start in India. What we call NETs, or negative emission technologies, which basically means, like we've talked about for years and years and years, I can see Narendra at the back, of actually doing a whole range of things on the land use side. We have to actually capture that carbon either mechanically and put them, or chemically and put them somewhere, which is what we call CCS technology, which sits at the end of the pipe as far as coal-fired plants are concerned. Or we have to do dramatic things in terms of moving into biofuels, or we have to do dramatic things in actually growing a lot of forests. Now, at the global scale, it may seem nice and cool to do that, because that's what Brazil has just done over the last 10 years by trying to conserve the deforestation in Amazonia, which is again started. But for over 10 years, there's been a big shift in Brazil, because the Norwegians give them $1 billion and they did a lot of stuff as far as that's concerned. They were able to, you know, do a whole range of economic development, land tenure, etc., etc., etc. But for us, there are really, really serious challenges if we have to use any of these things on the biomass side, or on the carbon capture side, on the land use thing, because it directly conflicts with agriculture, with livelihood, with scarce land, and a whole range of other conflicts that are embedded in our land system. So this is a very important debate that we actually have very, very few people in the country at the current point of time. Okay, so the simple message is, getting to 2 is going to be almost impossible given, I mean, it will be impossible given India's position as far as the world is concerned. For the world to get to 2, or for us to get to 2, we have to do tremendous amount of stuff in terms of actually sequestering carbon. Okay, it's not only changing the energy economy, and that will have very serious consequences in terms of conflict across the country, in terms of how land is used and how it's deployed, apart from questions of technology and how it's transferred and where the investments will come and whatever it is. So yeah, I think my colleagues are trying to say I better shut up very quickly, but just to quickly, I'll just show you a few things. So anyway, we're bringing together all of these funny things here. So what is the context as far as we're concerned? Basically, this is from work that they're going to show tomorrow from colleagues from IITM just now. This is the historical trends in terms of precipitation and temperature. Essentially, there's a drying out that's happening across the country. Okay, so precipitation is going down. We're looking particularly at semi-arid regions in this particular case. So temperatures, of course, are going to be rising. This is a trend from a paper that's published or about to be published. But precipitation, decline we can expect. These are all the dark blues are it's sort of counterintuitive, are reduction in precipitation. So the areas that are semi-arid now in northwestern India, in Rajasthan, Gujarat, etc., are going to dry out further. Similar kind of things are going to be happening in the region that we're in at the moment. So this is the historical trend. We've seen this from 51 for 2005. If we go, sorry, one slide back. What's happening here? I got the things mixed up. Sorry. Yeah. I'll move this back here. So basically, the story here is that semi-arid regions are going to expand, and areas that are currently semi-arid are going to become arid. Again, it's pretty obvious in some senses. But look at the expanse. So if you're sitting in in Hyderabad, Karnataka, which already has enough challenges, we can expect much more severe changes in the future. And this is, from the best work that we're doing. People are sitting in the room as far as this is concerned. So it's two things. First is there will be an expansion of semi-arid areas, but I think that's really challenging as far as we're concerned, is we're expecting to see significant, and these are, so anyway, there's lots of climate gobbledygook here. This is where the world will go if there was no Paris Agreement. This is where the world, a little bit higher than that, where the world will go if we really implement the Paris Agreement and get to 2 degrees. Okay, but even in that context, you find very significant changes in precipitation across. This is towards the end of the century. So there are big shifts that are going to take place, and you saw what's driving the shifts. Yeah. So we really, India has no option just now. We have to very, very significantly invest institutional capacity in dealing with adaptation. Now, the thing, of course, is we cannot anymore, especially if you see those maps, claim that this is something that somebody else has done to us. Yes, of course they've done to us. They've taken the carbon space, but today we have to be responsible for our own future and start addressing these questions. Certainly on the adaptation side, which is not in debate at the moment. We're not fighting enough, I think, on the adaptation side, on the climate story, but also on the mitigation side. So that's hopefully what we will be discussing tomorrow. There are lots of other graphs and various things on this kind of thing, which I won't go into from the paper that's there. So I guess the questions for us are really, and we will, who will do this stuff? What measures will be done? Where will it be done? When will it be implemented? How much will it cost? Yeah, these are the real questions that are important. This is where we start from. This is where we come from. So all the science is great, the policy is great, but at the end you have to get to this stuff. And our systems currently are so far away from this process that to get to this, to the daily lives of people, is a long way off. So that's why we want to open this debate here. And so these are all connected systems. The ecological systems are connected to the economic system. The economic systems are underpinned by highly stratified social systems. This is our big challenge in this country. Poor education, poor healthcare, etc. Human development is poor. But we have to transform all these things simultaneously. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had the choice of doing them separately. Maybe. Even then, maybe it would not be done. But today, we have no choice at all. We have to do them all together. And our policy has to be integrated with implementation on the ground at all levels. So it's a really interesting challenge. And we're not trained to deal with this. We just
do you mind terribly if we take questions over lunch?
Lunch, it's almost lunchtime now.
Yeah, it's almost lunchtime. So I know you have lots of questions, but Ara is going to be there for tea and there for the rest of the day. So unless you want your tea break cut, which has already been cut by 15 minutes, I would say let's end this session. Thank you all very much. Tea is outside. And if you can come back, 20 minutes? 20 minutes. 15 because Deepak is moderating the next session and he doesn't want you to skip that. So 15 to 20 minutes, please come back. Thank you all, sir. Let's have a hand of applause, please.
Flight got delayed terribly. They made us sit in the